Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start our today's discussion by taking the important articles featuring in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. And let's take up our first article for the day, which reads on amending the Cooperative Societies Act. Now this particular article appears in the newspaper because a new amendment bill has been will be promulgated in the parliament to amend the 2002 MultiState Cooperative Societies Act. Now, why is this amendment being done? So through this article, we'll delve into the realm of cooperative societies. We'll understand what exactly are cooperative societies, how they are so important for India, what kind of a role they have played in Indian society and Indian economy. That is why, what is their importance? And then we'll take up this aspect of the multi-state cooperative societies. What are their provisions? What is this 2002 Act? And what are the latest set of amendments that are suggested with respect to this Act? So let's understand this particular topic by first understanding the basics, starting with what exactly are these cooperatives. We see the mention of cooperatives, cooperative societies, cooperative banks all around us. But what exactly are these institutions? So by definition, cooperatives or cooperative organizations are organizations formed at the grassroots level by people to harness the power of collective bargaining towards a common goal. Now, the purpose of a cooperative society is therefore either the farmers or laborers or workers who are working at the grassroots level. So often we see that these individuals individually do not have the power to avail loan or take significant financial decisions or risks. But when their resources are pooled together, when they come together to take decisions together, their resources are also increased and their collective power to bargain also increases. This is the concept of cooperative societies, where individuals come together, pool their resources and share not just the resources but the technology, know-how, various aspects from each other and function better, and these organizations are simply known as the cooperative societies. So these are simply the cooperative societies. Now there are various types of the cooperative societies which we see in different sectors. So based on the sectors, there are different types of cooperative societies. So for example, in the field of agriculture, we see different types of cooperative societies, such as those in the dairy sector, sugar mills, spinning mills. So a very successful example for the cooperative in dairy sector is the Amul cooperative. So we all know the success of Amul as to how few dairy farmers came together and constituted Amul, and now it supplies not just to that milk, that particular state, but to all over India as well. So this is the success story of the cooperative society, which gives that much importance to these particular society, and therefore the regulation becomes important. So in the field of agriculture, we saw that there are various types, such as cooperative in the dairy sector, sugar mills. The cooperatives in the sugar sector also form a significant part of the sugar economy, so much so that the cooperative sugar mills account for 35% of the sugar produced in the country. So these are all cooperatives which are formed with pooled resources of the farmers who wish to process their produce together. And if we talk about the collective strength of these cooperatives, the country has around 1,94,000 cooperative dairy societies and 330 cooperative sugar mill operations running in the country. This shows the increasing significance with respect to cooperative society and these cooperative organizations. The second type is in banking and finance. Often we see certain cooperative banks being mentioned in the news, and we see around us. These cooperative banks are nothing but cooperative societies functioning and undertaking the function of banking and finance for each other. Then the cooperative institutions are spread across rural and urban areas, and the village level, this is a very significant cooperative society named as the Primary Agricultural Credit Society. These primary agricultural credit society are formed by farmer associations and are the best example of grassroots level credit flow. These particular primary agriculture societies are part of a three-tier system. This is the lowest tier, and the tier above it is the district level cooperative society, and the tier above it is the state level cooperative society. This is the 3-tier system which functions in the village levels and is regulated by the RBI. So this is a significant cooperative bank in the banking sector. Then we also have cooperatives in the marketing, such as known as the cooperative marketing societies and cooperative housing societies as well. These are the various cooperative societies which are basically existing in different areas. So we took a look at the types of these particular cooperatives. Now, when these cooperatives are spread across various fields and have assumed so much significance that they are not just a big part of the village economy, but they are a big driver of the village economy and are the reason for the prosperity of the farmers in a lot of areas of India. Therefore, their regulation becomes very important. So when we talk about regulation, who regulates the cooperatives in India? So cooperatives are a state subject under the Indian Constitution, which would mean that the jurisdiction for regulating cooperatives falls under each state wherever the cooperative is registered. So the state is the nodal unit for regulating the cooperatives. Then each state has a registrar of cooperatives that oversees this particular sector. And when it comes to the cooperative banks, RBI also keeps an eye on these cooperative banks. So this is the regulation structure with respect to the cooperatives. Then when we talk about cooperatives' importance, it is also reflected in the major boost that is given to the cooperatives in the recent years by the Indian government. What are some of the boosting measures that have been there for the cooperatives? The significant one was the 97th constitutional amendment, through which the Indian government or the central government through the parliament tried to amend the cooperative law in the country and instituted certain measures with respect to cooperatives. And it basically, a significant step was done when the word cooperative was added after the words unions and associations in Article 19 subclause 1 clause 1 subclause C under part 3 of the Constitution. We all know this is the part of the fundamental rights, part 3. So by adding the word cooperatives in the fundamental rights section, enables all the citizens to form cooperatives by giving it the status of fundamental rights. This was the boost that was given, where the right to form a cooperative was made a fundamental right. And not just this, a new article 43B was added in the directive principles of state policy, which we know are a part of part 4 in the Indian Constitution, which are basically directives for the state. Here the words were added: promotion of the cooperative societies. So this was the part of the 97th amendment, where these steps were done to boost the cooperative sector. And in the recent past, that is last year, a new ministry has been constituted separately for the governing of the cooperatives, known as the Ministry of Cooperation. This was done to give the added importance to cooperative sector. Earlier, the cooperative societies were regulated under the Ministry of Agriculture, but we all know that there are different types of cooperative societies and a dedicated ministry was needed for this, which is why the government constituted the Ministry of Cooperation. Here is where comes the role of the multi-state cooperative societies, which is the topic at hand over here for us in the article. So what are then the multi-state cooperative societies? Up until now, we were looking at cooperative societies which were registered in one state only. But there are various cooperative societies which might be indulged into certain businesses or certain activities which are spanning across states. For these activities, the center passed a Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act in 2002, which allowed for registration of societies with operations in more than one state. And these are especially for banks, dairies and sugar mills whose area of operations spread across states. It was done essentially for these three particular types of cooperative societies, and the nodal authority for regulating them was made the Central Registrar of Societies is their controlling authority. So this was the new act that was promulgated and passed in the year 2002, especially to function for multi-state cooperative societies, facilitate their registration and governing these particular multi-state cooperative societies. So we understood the difference between normal cooperatives and multi-state cooperatives. Now this particular article talks about amending this particular 2002 Act for the multi-state cooperatives. Now why is there a need for amendment over here? Because there are certain issues which are faced with respect to the multi-state cooperative sector or cooperative sector in general. Now what are these issues with respect to the cooperative sector? First of all, it is said that these cooperatives were initially brought in to give a sufficient amount of autonomy to the farmers, or the workers were becoming members of these particular cooperatives. But adding government regulation in it mostly resulted into more control over them, and it did not give a good result. So the policy of the state governments to contribute to the share capital of the cooperatives enabled governments in the name of public interest to directly intervene in the working of cooperatives which are legally autonomous. So the pretext of state intervening in them actually hampered their autonomy and way of functioning. Then the potency of cooperatives as an apparatus for political control can be seen in states such as Maharashtra, Kerala, Gujarat, parts of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh and West Bengal. Now what is this issue talking about? How are these cooperatives taken as apparatus for political control? So since we were tracing the development of cooperatives, we see that these are the grassroots organization wherein people come together to pool their resources. So whenever a group of people is are coming together, we can say that the leaders of that society can also arise from those particular areas. Therefore, it is also seen that these cooperatives are also the breeding grounds for grassroots level political leaders who have often gone on to become big leaders. This is the case in Maharashtra, where, to give an example, Sharad Pawar and members of his family have come up in the political arena, rising from the leadership in the cooperatives sector and cooperatives society only. So there are various examples with respect to this regard, and it is to be, therefore the control over cooperatives is often very important for the political leaders. Therefore the apparatus of this cooperatives is often used by these politicians. Then the multi-state cooperatives were formed to ease the operation of the collectives throughout the country, right? That was the facilitation that was made. But it is seen that these multi-state cooperatives are facing issues regarding trust, which was the very basis of cooperation. This has brought these particular multi-state cooperatives under multiple controls from the center, and whenever there would be multiple controls, the functioning of the society would hamper. And this kind of control is also not very democratic control. It is done from the top, so it takes a top-down approach as opposed to a grassroots one. This is coming as one other problem. Then there are various differences with respect to how the state registered societies are run and the multi-state ones are run. So while the system for state registration society includes checks and balances at multiple levels to ensure transparency in the process, these layers do not exist in the case of multi-state societies. So instead, the board of directors have control over all finances and administration. So the level of control over the multi-state cooperatives is less than the state registered ones, which is resulting into a lot of malfunction on the part of the multi-state cooperatives. Then, unlike the state cooperatives, which have to submit multiple reports on a day-to-day basis, these are certain everyday governance reports which state cooperatives have to submit, but the multi-state cooperatives do not have to submit this. This again hampers their functioning, and a proper check and balance with respect to their functioning is not able to be maintained. Then the on-ground infrastructure for central registrar is thin. As we saw, the regulating authority for multi-state cooperatives is the central registrar. But how can the central registrar regulate every multi-state cooperative society? It is the on-ground infrastructure for these particular bodies very less, and therefore there are no officers or officers at state level, with most work being carried out either online or through correspondence. So these are all the issues which showed that the multi-state cooperatives needed further protection and further regulation. That is why the amendment is coming out, which is intending to plug the certain loopholes that we can see. So what is the Amendment Act trying to do then? What are its major provisions of this Amendment Act? So the aim of this Amendment Act is to ensure transparency and ease of doing business for these multi-state cooperatives. So the first amendment that it is doing is in the sector of improving the governance, where we saw that the governance was very difficult for these multi-state cooperatives. So a creation of a cooperative rehabilitation, reconstruction and development fund would be taking place for the revival of the sick multi-state cooperative societies. Sick multi-state cooperative societies are those cooperative societies which are not able to function well and often are facing losses or are in great debt. So in order to take them out from their debt, a dedicated fund would be created which would take place, which would take up the task of reviving these multi-state cooperatives. Then second would be to reform the electoral process that takes place in these multi-state cooperatives. So the creation of a central cooperative election authority would take place to supervise the electoral functions of these multi-state cooperatives. So a dedicated election conducting body would also be constituted under this particular Amendment Act. Then in order to strengthen monitoring mechanisms, we saw that if not monitored, if these multi-state cooperatives are not monitored, a lot of malfunctioning and default in the loan cases were seen by the multi-state cooperatives. So to plug that, mandate to appoint cooperative information officer and a cooperative ombudsman has to be taken place. The cooperative information officer would ensure that all the information is disseminated to the public and also the higher authorities whatever is needed, and the ombudsman would take care of the grievances that anybody would have from the multi-state cooperatives. So this is the next part. Then to promote equity and facilitate inclusiveness in the multi-state cooperatives, there would be provisions relating to the representation of women and scheduled castes and tribes members on the boards of these multi-state cooperatives that have also been included. So these are also the provisions that are added to facilitate inclusiveness. Then to enhance transparency and accountability, the bill seeks to improve the composition of the board and ensure financial discipline besides enabling the raising of funds in the multi-state cooperative societies. So this is the gist with respect to what exactly the Amendment Act to the 2002 Multi-State Cooperatives Act is wanting to do. There are various criticisms or oppositions to these amendments as well, where the criticizers are basically trying to say that by increasing the government control over these multi-state cooperatives is actually hampering their autonomy, hampering their functioning. But as we can see, there is ample need to regulate them in a proper manner as well. What needs to be made sure is that there is sufficient control and sufficient autonomy with respect to their control is also given to these multi-state cooperatives. So this was a discussion with respect to this article, and with it let's move on to our next article for the day, which reads Clean Ganga changes course to conservation, tourism, livelihood. Now this particular article appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of the flagship program which is instituted by the government to clean river Ganga, which is known as the Namami Gange program. So through this article we understand about river Ganga and the Namami Gange program and other initiatives which are taken up by the government in order to revive or conserve river Ganga, to clean it and work for its rejuvenation. So from the examination point of view, we understand what these initiatives are all about, what are the different components of these initiatives, how has the performance been until now, are there any challenges that are there with respect to this particular mission, and what new steps is the article talking about that these particular programs are next going to take up. So let's understand about the Namami Gange program. What exactly is the Namami Gange program? This Namami Gange program is an integrated conservation mission approved as a flagship program by the Union government in June 2014 to accomplish the twin objectives of effective abatement of pollution and conservation and rejuvenation of river Ganga. So this was the dedicated flagship program which was launched in the year 2014 as soon as the current Prime Minister came into power, and this was done with the objective of cleaning river Ganga. So is it that other missions or initiatives to clean river Ganga were not taking place before this? There were other missions as well, but this mission was launched separately and to give a further boost to those particular past missions. And this is operated under the Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation, which is functioning under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So someone asks which ministry is the Namami Gange program functioning under? It is the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Then this program is being implemented by the National Mission for Clean Ganga, or NMCG, and the state counterpart organization, that which means the organization at the state level, which are known as the State Program Management Groups, or SPMGs. So as we can understand over here, the name of the mission flagship program is Namami Gange. It is operated under Ministry of Jal Shakti and is being implemented by the National Mission for Clean Ganga. Now what is this National Mission for Clean Ganga? It is a society registered under the Indian Societies Act. It is the implementation wing of the National Ganga Council. This National Ganga Council was earlier known as National Ganga River Basin Authority, or NRGBA, which was disbanded in the year 2016, and in its place was constituted the National Ganga Council. This National Ganga Council is a very important arm. This council is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. So let's understand all this difference between what exactly is National Ganga Council, what exactly is the National Mission to Clean Ganga, what is the difference between these two. So when we say that the Namami Gange program is being implemented by the National Mission for Clean Ganga, and which in fact is the implementation wing of the National Ganga Council. So what do we mean by that? So first of all, this National Ganga Council is a larger body which is chaired by the Prime Minister, and this National Ganga Council is a statutory body because it was formed under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. So the National Ganga Council is a statutory body, it's a larger body, and under that body a smaller implementing body functions, which is known as the National Mission for Clean Ganga. It acts as an implementation arm of the National Ganga Council, and it was established in the year 2011 as a registered society. So remember, the National Mission for Clean Ganga is a registered society. It has a two-tier management structure and comprises of governing council and executive committee. And this particular mission got a corpus initially of 20,000 crore, which is centrally funded, and a non-lapsable corpus consisting of nearly 288 projects at that point of time. So this was the initial outlay for this particular mission. The further outlays have definitely increased, and therefore the number of projects and the amount that is given to the ministry has also increased. So here we try to understand the structure with respect to this particular program, where what is the Namami Gange program, what is it functioning under, what exactly is the National Mission for Clean Ganga, how does it get linked to the National Ganga Council. We try to understand all of that. I hope it is clear now, and further there would be no confusion with respect to that. So now, after understanding the structure, let's understand what are the main pillars of this program. What is this program actually intending to do? So the main pillar of these programs is basically, as we saw, to conserve river Ganga and to rejuvenate it. So in order to clean the pollution, the sewage treatment plants and the installation of these plants is very necessary. So the first pillar is to install these treatment plants and infrastructure and industrial effluent monitoring, the waste that the industries are putting out in the river, to monitor that. Then riverfront development and river surface cleaning, or biodiversity and afforestation and public awareness with respect to cleaning of the river Ganga. So what are the objectives then under the mission which they are trying to do? As we saw, this mission incorporates rehabilitating and boosting the existing sewage treatment plants. So sewage treatment plants is its installation, its monitoring, that is the objective, to maintain the continuity of the water flow without changing the national season variations, to restore and maintain the surface flow and groundwater, to regenerate and maintain the natural vegetation of the area, to conserve and regenerate the aquatic biodiversity as well as the riparian biodiversity of the Ganga basin, and to allow participation of the public in the process of protection, rejuvenation and management of the river. These are the objectives under the Namami Gange program, which the mission intends to do in a holistic revival of the river. So now let's talk about what are the new steps taken then with respect to the Namami Gange program. The article says that apart from the mission which was earlier focusing on the mitigation of the pollution and revival of the river, certain other aspects would also be taken into consideration now, and the mission program would be spread across different sectors. So the sectors are added, and first is the concept of Arth Ganga. This was earlier suggested by the Prime Minister also. The Arth Ganga actually signifies the economic potential of the river, or what kind of economic objectives can be furthered with respect to the river Ganga, and it can be leveraged with respect to tourism. So therefore the ministry is going to develop tourism circuits along the river, and is planning fairs in around 75 towns along the main stem of the river. This would give boost to the tourism along the river regions. Then the agriculture ministry is taking steps to build organic farming and natural farming corridors. So in order to boost the environment with respect to the areas, and also give a boost to the livelihood of the people, it is planning to build organic farming and natural farming corridors. Then the urban affairs ministry is focused on making mapping drains and solid waste management programs. This is done by the urban affairs ministry. And the environment ministry is scaling up afforestation and conservation efforts to protect the Gangetic river dolphin. These are the new steps taken by the under the Namami Gange program. So when we talk about the performance of this scheme until now, it can be said that certain work is done, and some kind of installation with respect to the sewage treatment plants and cleaning up of the river has been done, but a lot needs to be covered yet. So there are certain challenges which are there in the performance of the Namami Gange program. And what are these challenges? Where a financial audit of this particular scheme in the 2018 suggested that where 20,000 crore had been sanctioned for 193 projects, only 4,000 crore had actually been spent on their implementation. This audit showcased the lack of facilitation and expendition of the funds with respect to these projects. And then the projects from the number of 193 were increased to 408 up until now, and of these 408 projects sanctioned under the program, 228 have been completed and 132 are in progress, and the rest in various stages of tendering. So even the projects which are sanctioned, not a lot of number of them have been completed, and still a lot of work needs to be done with respect to the sanctioning and the completion of the projects under the program. So this was a discussion with respect to this particular article. We come to the end of today's discussion over here, and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.